Hello
Hello there.
there. Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli,
I'm Jacob.
and today we are continuing our quest through Season 1 of Star Wars The Bad Batch. We are talking about the 4th, 5th, and 6th episodes of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Cornered, Rampage, and Decommissioned. And we got some great stuff, but I think we should just dive into it.
In Cornered, the Bad Batch once again find themselves in a difficult situation. They are running low on supplies. They're running low on fuel. They land on the planet of Pantora, the closest inhabited planet, um, in order to resupply themselves, in order to fix their ship, in order to scramble their signature. However, the dock worker, or the owner of the docking bay, uh, calls in Fennec Shand to hunt them down. As they are maneuvering their way through the city, the Bad Batch happen upon a merchant who, mistaking Echo for a droid, offers to buy Echo. Um, and needing the credits, Hunter sells Echo to this merchant, with the knowledge that Echo will try to escape later on. However, Omega is distracted and runs off, gets lost. She is found by Fennec Shand. Um, she brings Fennec Shand back to Hunter. Um, as one can imagine, shenanigans ensue. A lot of chase scenes, speeder chase, multiple Omega falling through the air, gets caught hanging off of buildings. Crazy stuff. Um, However, they manage to give Fennec Shand the slip, and they escape with Echo intact.
Absolutely, that's what happened, and this episode is a really interesting episode. I feel like the first thing I want to dive into is Ming-Na Wen, who is a gem, and I love her as Fennec Shand, and I think she gives a great performance in this episode.
Oh, absolutely. I was very happy with the way that they integrated Fennec Shand into it. I think I really liked her portrayal. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of criticism of the Bad Batch for kind of having so many cameos. A lot of talk about, is there small galaxy syndrome? Is there is it too much having this many characters? Is it detracting from the show? But I think this one is one of the ones that really works. Um, I think in my mind it only makes sense. We already can kind of see through the rest of Star Wars. You can kind of extrapolate that. As far as bounty hunters go, the galaxy may be awash in scum and villainy, but it seems like there's a pretty tight knit community of really like elite, like the best of the best. There's a really tight knit crew. Um, and if Fennec is part of that crew, as it seems like she is being made to be, possibly, then it just makes sense.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think that Fennec adds a really interesting twist to the show. She's one of our first characters to go from a live action television show to an animated television show, which is one of the first times we were able to say that, which is crazy. Um, like imagine if we got an animated Mandalorian, like an
Yeah,
animated Din, like
I would love
that.
that, honestly.
I would love that too. I'm not saying that I would hate that in any way. I'm just saying like it's so weird that this is the first time we've had that phenomenon of an animated Fennec Shand.
Well, I,
Um,
I think they absolutely nailed it.
oh, absolutely, I think they did too, and I think Migna adds a lot to that authenticity.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, it does. I think it's always great when they can maintain the voice actor live action continuity. I really
yeah,
I really enjoy that.
absolutely. What do you got next for this?
Man, I think when I was thinking about this episode, I think one theme that really jumped out to me, was kind of the morally gray decisions that the batch now have to engage in, now that they're really on their own. um they're mercenaries. We see at the very beginning, the bribe scene, obviously, a tech and Hunter are a little bit dumbfounded, but they realize what's up, and they're forced to do something a little bit morally gray just to survive. And then later in the episode, we see them getting, in order to get the credits, Echo has to play act as, and Echo has to be sold as property, with the knowledge that they're gonna purposefully, swindle this guy, and put this merchant out of 3,000 credits, which I don't know. I think the money is always a little fuzzy in Star Wars, but not an insignificant amount, no matter what way you cut it. So I think, and this is something that I think we can talk about even more as the episodes go on, because we see a lot more of this in Rampage as well, and then yeah, just in Rampage. But I was really interested to hear what you think about this. How does this fit into you, with the bigger picture for the Bad Batch? What's your takeaway as we see them trying to negotiate this this brave new world for them, where they have to really think about the consequences of their actions?
I think you raise a really great point, and I think of this stuff. I think of those questions as the I feel like there are three real big thematic questions that linger through this first season. The first one is that is that battle? This is not really a question, but like a theme, of the homogeny versus the individuality of the, and we'll see that in Decommissioned. Of the do I go with the groupthink, or do I forge my own path, make my own decisions? That's one. The second one is Omega's hero's journey,
Oh,
and her
absolutely.
absolutely discovering who she is, and who she is in relation to the batch. And of course, the third one is the one you mentioned, which is the what the hell are we doing here? It's
Yeah.
the galaxy no longer has a purpose for us, so we need to make ourselves have a purpose for the galaxy. And and part of that process involves making those mistakes. Part of that process involves doing things that maybe looking back you wouldn't have done. And I feel like Cornered, Rampage, and Decommission are those three. I feel like, if we look at, I think very much of the season as the big event at the beginning, then some stuff, the big event in the middle, which we'll get to next episode, then some more stuff, and the big event at the end. If you
Yeah,
look at the stuff in the middle of both of them, between like beginning and middle, and then middle and end, the stuff between middle and end is way more noble than the stuff between beginning and middle.
yeah, I mean, I think throughout this story we kind of see, with hindsight, we can kind of talk about this arc that they go through, where they're really adrift in the beginning, and they're really making some bad choices. They're full on mercenaries. We will really get to the heart of this when we talk about Rampage, but they're really doing things that they're doing jobs, and they're doing things, they're moving information, they're moving resources that really have consequences, and they're doing it completely unquestioningly. They're just following the orders. They're not
Well,
they're not asking the questions.
I wouldn't say they're doing it unquestioningly. I mean, I
Not
understand they're not.
unquestioningly, but like
Yeah,
they're
I understand where
choosing
you're
to
getting
kind
at.
of they're choosing to kind of, they're choosing to kind of, look the other way, maybe a little, maybe not look the other way, but they're choosing to maybe not look as hard as they could, maybe kind of hold their
Yeah.
nose a little bit as they shake some hands. Maybe they shouldn't. But I think that throughout the series, I feel like we have this arc where they realize. I think this show is all about realizing that, um, in order for the batch to survive and thrive, in order for Omega to thrive, what they actually need to be doing is helping people and fighting to make a difference. And um I think that Hunter, specifically, his journey to realizing that, helping his crew survive and helping Omega have a good life is not actually at odd. It doesn't have to be at odds with making a difference in the galaxy. And that's kind of a similar thing. It's very much connected, to me at least, with season 1 of Rebels. We kind of see Ezra. We're seeing a very Ezra-like process for Hunter, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually kind of, if we view these three as a mini arc, that's kind of what these three are about. They're about Hunter coming to realize, and the batch as a whole coming to realize that maybe the whole mercenaries idea is not the best.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because I think in this episode, they do some lightweight mercenary work. Taking a bribe, it's not the end of the world. But then you see them, you know, swindling swindling like a random shopkeeper out of a ton of money.
Yeah,
That's much more serious than like handing off 100 credits or whatever. And then we see in the next episode, it goes into this slavery, working with Jabba the Hutt. But then you see them come out the other side when Hunter realizes what the right thing to do is, and they end up, kind of sharing the spoils with the Martez sisters
yeah,
at the end. So I think we kind of see them in this arc. As you said, they toe the line, but they realize, hey, like this is not what we should be doing.
yeah. Um, let's see. I speaking of that, like sort of mini droid revolt, I really like that in this episode. First of all, I want to mention because I remember how much he was getting seen over the internet, and I feel like when this episode came out, and I feel like he deserves his due. And I'm talking about the legendary Clink. What a legend!
Mm,
What a legendary droid that is.
absolute
I
legend.
love Clink. I forgot that he was in this episode. I knew he was in the batch, but I forgot that he was in this episode. He's awesome. I love him. We need justice for Clink. Uh, we need more Clink. That's all I'm gonna say about Clink. Justice for Clink. Um, no, there's also this like thing I noticed with Fennec, and that's interesting. That I think like when Fennec captures Omega, and maybe this is just her like facade she puts on, but I feel like Fennec is a better person than like the truly evil, ruthless bounty hunters like Cad Bane, Aura Singh, Bosk, Boba in his prime pre Sarlacc pit. Like, I'm not saying she's a good person. I'm saying that I think for her it really is about the money. Like Cad Bane and Aura Singh can say it's about the money, and it kind of is, but like also they're cruel people.
Well, I think those two things are intertwined. Like what makes them cruel is that it's all about the money, and there's absolutely nothing that they won't do for money. I mean, that being said, you're right as well. I think they clearly like also kind of take pleasure in inflicting fear and pain on people, and maybe, yeah, you're right. I think, yeah, Fennec Shand definitely doesn't as much. We see her kind of treat Omega really sweetly, whereas Aura Singh or Cad Bane or someone else probably would have just grabbed her by the wrist and be like, probably would have said, quiet kid.
I mean, that's what Cad Bane does in a few
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah,
Like that is literally what Cad Bane does. Um, and we'll get to that next episode. But it's really interesting to see those different types of bounty hunters, different types of neutral characters, kind of that stuff with how that's proceeding. Um,
yeah. And I think that's it very much matches up with where we see Fennec Shand next pop up in Mandalorian, in Book of Boba Fett, where she is still kind of a mercenary, and she's in it for power and money for herself, but she also does still care about protecting the people that her and Fett have assumed dominion over, at least to some extent. And
yeah,
I think in some ways she's kind of the opposite coin of the Bad Batch, where she's doing she's doing pretty bad things, to make a buck, but she does have some good in there. Like she doesn't like she's sweet to Omega. She tries to put Omega at ease. And maybe that's all for the grand the maybe that's all in the grand scheme of, trying to get Omega to come with her. But it still kind of raises the question of kind of on the opposite, like I said, the opposite side of the coin of the Bad Batch. How do you like kind of a little like Hondo, like if you're doing bad things, can you still does it count for you to still do some good in there if you're ultimately just out for yourself? Like how much does it really change who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. What else do you have for this episode?
I also thought so I mean a big part of this episode I think was Hunter and Omega. I think in their obviously, the entirety of the Bad Batch family is involved in this, but really it's I think Hunter and Omega. Anyone will tell you Hunter and Omega are at the core of that, with Hunter trying to be the space dad and Omega trying to become part of the Bad Batch. Um, and I thought this episode did a really good job of showing that development. Um, for some examples, Hunter, he makes the mistake of letting Omega run off. Obviously we see Omega here, still very much more on the innocent side of things. She runs off. She's not worried about the danger or anything. Um, but also, on the flip side of that, like Omega is absolutely fearless. She immediately attacks Fennec. When the fight breaks out between Fennec and Hunter, she immediately like jumps right in the fray, to try and save her friend. Um, so I think I was very interested in that trajectory, because obviously that's I think the central storyline here, or the central theme of at least the first half of the season, is kind
Yeah,
of Hunter and Omega.
yeah, no, building that family is extremely important, and I think they do it well in this episode. Additionally, with Wrecker as well, I love that line. You mess with the kid, you mess with me.
Oh
The
yeah, I
Fennec.
mean, I mean, everybody loves. Sorry, go ahead.
It's that protective Wrecker that just
Oh
works
yeah,
for me.
it's great. Yeah, I
By the
mean,
way, his head is still hurting. Should we be worried about that?
nah, it's probably nothing, right?
Yeah, no, it's
They
nothing.
they can't just be mentioning it episode
No,
after episode after
no,
episode. No
no,
reason for that. No
no
reason for
reason.
that.
None. Uh, I gotta be honest with you. These three episodes were tough for me.
How so?
Specifically, this one. Um, I'm not gonna say I love this episode. I like it, it's fun, but there's not that much to it for me. For me, this episode is the Fennec Shand episode of
Yeah,
the batch. Like to me, it's the like they land. Fennec's like the doc alerts them to Fennec. Fennec chases them around for 20 minutes and then they leave. And I understand the purpose of what the episode's trying to convey. That even though they're off of Camino, that does not mean that they're safe. That people will still keep coming after Omega in a very Mandalorian-esque way. And I understand that. I don't think they chose a very interesting way of doing it, though. There just isn't
yeah,
that much to this episode, is my problem.
yeah. I mean, this is definitely one of the more simplistic episodes. I kind of liked that about it, or it wasn't necessarily a positive, but I made my peace with it. I think something about the way that we do this show and my creative process, when I'm trying to, come in here with a little something to say that hopefully hasn't been said before.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people in one way or another love to do what we do. And I know there are a lot of people who I know are much, much better at this than me, but yeah, I oftentimes struggle to grapple with some of these episodes that, maybe they're not like maybe there's not a bombshell being dropped. Maybe it's not the most like thematically rich masterpiece, but I think that doesn't mean that there aren't things to be said about it, and we don't always have to be. I've kind of made my peace with, you know, we don't always have to have like an hour long deep philosophical discussion
Yeah.
about every episode, because some of them are not, that's not all what they're all trying to do, you know.
No, absolutely. And I'm not saying that I think we need to. I'm just saying I guess I'm a bit frustrated with this episode
Mm,
because I understand the purpose it's trying to get across. I just think it could have done it better. Like
how
I
so?
think I just think that what I was missing really was interactions between the characters. Like I think there were some good interactions with between the characters, but I don't think there were enough. I think we needed some. I think we needed some like how do I say it? Like reason to care a bit more. And again, not that we
Mm.
don't care about the batch, we do, but I've heard a lot of people talking about like I would love to see more development of I've heard a lot of people talk about development for tech, and I can see that, but the real
Oh,
one
absolutely, yeah.
is more development for Echo for me. Like Echo
Yeah.
is the most fascinating character of the batch to me, honestly, because we know him from not the batch. We know him from TCW where he was under Anakin with Fives and Rex and all that kind of stuff. He is the most connected to the Skywalker saga of all of them. He is most in the know about what the fuck's going on. Um, and he just kind of stands there a lot. Um, and it agitates me. Like he's the one that finds Sid. Uh, he's the one that's closest with Jedi. If Ahsoka ever came into the Bad Batch series, which I thought she was going to do in season one, and now that she hasn't, I'm even more confident that she'll be in season two. Actually, um, like if Ahsoka
Really?
came into, yeah, I'll say that now. If it,
All right.
if this show ends with Ahsoka not in it, I'm going to be very surprised.
Place your bets. All right.
I'll be impressed, but I'll be very surprised. Not that I think Ahsoka is bad in any way possible. I just know that with these kinds of shows, with the animated shows, even though I know this is not being directly influenced by Dave Filoni, the people who are doing a lot of the writing on this, like, they know what legacy they're inheriting. They know what characters they're inheriting. And I would find it hard to believe that I find it hard to believe that there at least have been conversations about, hey, what if we bring Ahsoka into this? How will Ahsoka interact with the Bad Batch? Because remember, Ahsoka hasn't met the Bad Batch, any of them, except for Echo, and she doesn't know that he's alive.
Yeah, true.
Um,
I mean, I hope that he will get some love in season two. I hope that some of the
yeah,
more peripheral members will get fleshed out more. I think, yeah, I think not to be not to push the Star Wars Rebels agenda too much. But I think that Rebels, for example, which I think is more, the more I think about it, the more I see the similarities. Obviously, as a kind of a found family focused show where you have the family unit, and their ship is kind of the home base. And um, you know, um I think Rebels does a better job of kind of fleshing out in the first season, making sure that we get a little something at least to chew on um for each character. But I assume that that's coming. I assume that that's on the way with season two coming.
I
So I'm not too concerned about that.
yeah.
But I do agree it is frustrating that we have so much potential in Echo. But like you said, he's kind of sidelined for a lot of it.
Yeah, and I actually I'm gonna retract something I said earlier. I actually think that Tech is given more to do in this season than most people give him credit for. But I think Echo's really the one that's bumming me out a bit.
Mm,
And there's some great moments with him too. Like the stuff with Hunter selling him as a droid, like he's like, wait, I should be sold for at least 4,000. Like I'm like
Yeah.
I forgot about that. I was just dying laughing at that part. And there's another part which you know what? Shoot, I'm gonna talk about it right now. Can we talk about the greatest line of dialogue in any of these 3 episodes in Decommissioned?
What's that?
Is there an echo in here? That is perfect, and whoever wrote that deserves a raise. Um, uh, Trace says that to Omega, and then Echo's like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And she's like, "What the hell's going on?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm Echo," and it's just one of those mental, oh, there we go, moments. One of those mental facepalm moments. In only the best way for me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think if I can bring up something, I got lost in my notes. Hang on. Um, I think Eli, I think I have a new favorite Glup Shitto from
Is it
this episode.
is it the guy with is the Aqualish with the headphones on?
Yes, it is vibing Aqualish dump truck pilot. I love vibing Aqualish dump truck pilot, man. That's how I aspire to be. Just unbothered, in your lane, flourishing, listening to some
Oh,
Star Wars
absolutely.
music,
That like
some jizz music
yeah.
perhaps. Um,
I was looking it up. It
are there
literally
any other genres canonically in Star Wars of music?
uh other than jizz, I mean, we got some pretty interesting music in Andor recently on Niamos, but
There's that one episode in Visions as well.
oh
The
yeah, Tatooine
galactic
Rhapsody.
pop punk.
Yeah, Tatooine Rhapsody.
That was certainly
Um
something.
yeah, Andor I know. I'm trying to think in oh, we got Space Thundercat in Book of Boba Fett. Um, we're getting a lot of good
We
music
didn't see
these
him
days
play
in Star
music
Wars.
though, which was disappointed. We got
No,
Space
but
Flea too.
we got Space Flea, but no music from him either.
We have to have a Space Flea, Space Thundercat meeting.
Just a
That
space
would be
bassist meeting. Just
space.
to
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
put pop Dave Grohl in there. No,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think just to Eli, just
no
to
wait,
see
not
your
Dave Grohl.
reaction. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I would flip out. Not Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl's the drummer. What
yeah,
am I talking about?
just to
Um,
see you with all your passion and knowledge of music. I would love to see you absolutely.
I would fucking explode, man. I would absolutely. I'm trying to think
What
of
would you
what's
do if
another
there was a scene where someone
like
goes into a
space.
cantina and
Well,
it's Flea and
Space Thundercat,
um
Space Flea.
Flea
I'm
and
trying to think
Thundercat
of other good
absolutely
modern bassists.
throwing down.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other ones. I can't right now. Um. Let's see. Oh my god. That's a good one. I just thought of another one. If freaking Thundercat and if Thundercat and Flea and Adam Neely, if you know his channel on YouTube,
I do not.
he's a music YouTuber on he's a music YouTuber and he's a bassist as well.
Mm.
The three of them together in a scene would blow my mind. Never going to happen, but like, oh my god, if it did.
Lucasfilm, take notes.
Lucasfilm, listen up, listen up, Lucasfilm. You're definitely listening to this and listen. Got anything else?
I'm
Or
sure.
should we proceed on to Rampage?
Not really, honestly. I enjoyed this episode. I think I don't know, I think some of the things that you disliked about it, I liked. I mean, like you said, there's not too much to this one. I think though, um, I think it was well paced. I think it was well executed. Great action. Um, great chase scenes. The music was there. Fantastic visuals. I think it just did a really solid episode for a job that, or it did a really solid job for an episode that just had to kind of keep keep the story moving. Um, keep the story moving without some massive new revelation.
Yeah, I think it's a cute little episode. That's really my review of it. I think it's a cute little episode. Um, I think it's one of my least favorites of this season, but again, I think this season overall is very, very good. So I'm holding everything to a high bar. Um, but do you want to go on to the Rampage?
Rampage, let's do it.
Rampage. In Rampage, the Bad Batch lands on the planet of Ord Mantell in its first on-screen canon appearance ever since being mentioned in all the way back in 1980 with The Empire Strikes Back.
That's impressive.
It is very impressive. They land on Ord Mantell and they approach a bar of a former Jedi informant named Sid. They eventually meet Sid, who is a Trandoshan voiced by Rhea Perlman of all people, which is crazy. And they want Sid to give them information about the bounty hunter who tracked them on Pantora, and Sid agrees in exchange for them to do a job for her. And they're set to rescue this kid named Muchi from Zygerrian slavers on the other side of the planet. And so they go to the other side of the planet in it's what's called Old Ord Mantell City. And the Batch orders Omega to stay behind while they go and deal with it. And oops, they're all captured. And Omega evades the Zygerrian patrols that are sweeping the Havoc Marauder and eventually rescues them. At which point they realize that they thought a young Falleen girl was Muchi, but indeed it was actually an adolescent Rancor who they were trying to rescue. We flash back to Sid, and we realize that the person she is giving the Rancor to, Muchi the Rancor to, is Bib Fortuna, who is the mayor domo to Jabba the Hutt. And so the Bad Batch manages to calm down Muchi enough and transport her away from the transport her away from the Zygerrians and bring her back to Sid, who gives her to Bib Fortuna. She gives them a small amount of the pay, and she also tells them that the bounty hunter chasing them was Fennec Shand, and that she was working on a direct commission. So they don't exactly know, and we don't at this time know who sent her. Okay.
Where do you want to jump in? What's your pleasure?
Again, I think we already talked about this a little bit, but there's that really great theme, I think, with this episode, especially. I know you talked about it a bit with Cornered, but I think it really rings true in this episode about what jobs are the Batch willing to take. I don't think they ever learn that, like, I don't know if like, Tech probably knows, but I don't know if the other members of the Batch knew who Bib Fortuna was, and who he worked for.
Yeah, I think it was just I think whether or not they knew is kind of irrelevant. It's just a nod to the viewers to kind of drive the point home.
It's not the fact that they know that's the thing. It's the fact that we do. We know exactly who Jabba the Hutt is, and we know exactly what he likes to do with Rancors.
Yeah. Have them eat innocent people.
Yep. I also realized this episode, which is great. I realized that with this episode and In the Name of Honor now, both Fett siblings have made a significant bond with a Rancor. Omega in this episode, and then Boba in the Book of Boba Fett, which I think is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
I love looking at the weird parallels between Omega and Boba that have been showing up quite a bit ever since the Bad Batch and the Book of Boba Fett. It's almost like it's almost like they have one person who's has a major role in making both of them.
Yeah, who could it be?
Who could it be? But yeah, it's
almost like they're related or something.
almost like. Uh, but I I love that they're in this episode and in Decommissioned and later on, of course, in the season. They're very they're very iffy. They're very iffy on whether or not to trust Sid.
Yeah,
Um,
and rightfully so.
Rightfully
Rightfully
so,
so.
because she is very suspicious. Like I think by the end it's been proven that she can be trusted at the bare minimum level, but I also think that she holds back a lot of their development as characters in this season.
How
And
so?
I think that's intentional. I think that's intentional on the writer's part. I think that they are a little too dependent on her and her services when she is not giving
Oh,
them
absolutely. Yeah.
and that's their destiny is not working for her.
I mean, that's kind of the whole point, as
Yeah.
long as they're following this mercenary path, they're not actually getting anywhere. And, Sid kind of makes it pretty clear with her thinly veiled threats to rat them out that she makes it pretty clear that she's taking advantage of them. Um, so yeah, I think it's very, very much by design.
Yeah. And it's yeah, I know. Yeah. I absolutely agree with what you said. Um let's see. You got anything for this episode so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, thematically, the central piece, I think with Crosshair kind of out of the way for these episodes, we have the two pillars. We have the two pillars of Omega and the Bad Batch and space parenting, and then ad- adapt or die with the past. Or
Yeah.
as you put it,
As
what the hell are we doing here?
yeah, adapt to die with the past is good because of course that's what Saul said in Aftermath.
Um, I think with Sid's introduction, I think it's very interesting that Sid was a Jedi contact, and that she worked with the Jedi, and we see how shady she is. She has Wookiee pelts for crying out loud. Like
She's a
I feel like in
Trandoshan.
Star Wars, like that's a sign. When someone has the Wookiee pelt, that's a sign that maybe they're bad news. I feel like it gets
Yeah.
used like that.
and,
So
and, and it's really great actually that Echo specifically mentioned that she's a Jedi informant because it
yeah.
shows how out of their comfort zone the Jedi were willing to go in the Clone Wars era to get the information they needed.
Oh yeah. Oh no,
How
absolutely. I
willing they
mean,
were to compromise their morality, which is a very prequel-esque theme.
yeah. It's been a while. It's been a while, Eli, since I've
Do it. Do it.
harped. Yeah, you know
Please
what
do
I'm
it.
about the
Go,
fall of the
go,
Jedi.
go.
About the fall of the
Baby.
Jedi.
Woo!
So I will say, yeah, like you said, this shows how the Jedi throughout the war, they compromised their morals, they shifted their ideals,
They
pursuing the ill-advised goal of being a military force and trying to lead the Republic to
what
victory
they
in this
do?
war when they should be keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
They did what?
They lost their way.
Yeah, there we go. He
But
said the line. He said the line, folks. He said
but
the
I
line.
said the line. I'm going somewhere with this though. I'm
No, no,
going
no.
somewhere with this, Eli.
I'm. It's completely like you're completely on base with this stuff.
No, no, because I think that this is it kind of serves it it can what happened to the Jedi obviously can kind of serve as a lesson for the Bad Batch, because we saw that the Jedi, they died with the past, not because they didn't adapt or couldn't adapt, but because they adapted too much, or in trying to adapt, they lost who they are.
And
They
I would
became
say they
this
were also
military
kind of
force.
stuck in their ways as well.
They were simultaneously stuck in their ways and also completely going off the rails at the same time. Those two things can absolutely coexist. I agree with you. In the
Yeah.
one hand, they were way too traditional. They were super arrogant. I gotta say it, I feel bad, roasting the Jedi Order. Love the Jedi Order. But
Yeah.
it has to be said at this point in the story. Um, but I think we see the Jedi lose their way, lose who they are, lose sight of what made them great and important by becoming warriors, by becoming soldiers, by becoming political tools of the Republic, by allowing themselves to get dragged into the intrigue and the politics and all that stuff. And I think the lesson here is that if the Bad Batch aren't careful, they're going to get torn apart if they get dragged down the mercenary pathway. You know, that's that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for those who are wondering, yeah, um, that is also true in the most recent shorts from Tales of the Jedi. I could not bring that up. I feel like this theme is very, 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 very prevalent in shorts 2 through 6 of Tales of the Jedi, and if you're wondering when we're covering those on In a Galaxy, the answer is sometime. We'll figure it out. Almost all of them are before we've are before where we are in the timeline. So that makes it tricky. I'm not gonna lie to you, but we'll
maybe we just
see.
maybe just pop in a special episode or two at some point.
Yeah, at some point we'll do that. I'm sure.
We've not really done a lot of special episodes lately.
Uh, Pause for a second. I'm gonna just update you. Next episode, we're doing a special episode. Next episode is scheduled for. I don't want to do Tales though. Not next
Yeah,
episode.
what are we gonna do?
I don't know. We'll talk about it later. I just don't
All right,
want
we'll
to do
figure it out.
Tales because I think it's a little too new.
Okay. No, I agree. I feel like part of our show, you know, we're not a news.
Yeah.
We're not like a
Yeah, I feel like we should have at least 6 months
yeah.
distance on stuff we're doing,
Like I feel like what we're
or at
doing
least a
is
few
kind of.
months. Yeah.
I feel like our thing is we're going through the archives.
Yeah,
Like that's
absolutely.
how it started.
Yeah,
And I
no,
feel like that's when we're at our best.
I think that's extremely important for us, and I'm
Yeah.
glad you agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Let's see. So what else you got here? Let's see. I'll say this
Um.
actually. I'll say this. I love the new developments we get with Zygerrian culture here.
Oh
We
yeah.
haven't seen them
Totally.
since 2010, I think it is. 2010, 2011, something like that. Maybe 2012, I forget what it is. Season 4 of the Clone Wars is the last time we saw them, and they're having to adapt to the Empire too. They're talking about rebuilding their slave empire now that the Republic is no longer exists, and that the Empire seems a lot cooler with slavery than the Republic was. We get a Kadavo shout out, which was really cool. I remember the first time I watched that around a year ago. I remember hearing the we will reclaim Kadavo. I'm like, oh
Oh
yeah.
boy. Oh boy.
It's stuff like that's just nice to hear. Just thrown out. We hear their
Those little
like
connections.
their curse word that scug. They
Oh
use that
yeah.
word. It's stuff like that makes it like um that makes the like world building a bit more interesting in this kind of episode.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Also, I can't help but I can't not mention that the Bad Batch got their ass kicked.
They did. Yeah.
Again,
They're not invincible.
this is another lesson for them, which is that like again, like they got their ass kicked, and who got them out of it?
Omega.
Omega got them out of it.
How lucky are they that
How,
Omega was able to save the day?
yeah,
I mean,
and this is the big lesson for them. Omega is not their squad's ward. Like she's not like they're not protecting her. She is a part of the squad. And them trying to
yeah.
ignore
I
that
mean,
is them deluding themselves. And I think they're a little bit more cautious of her because of her running off and getting captured by Fennec briefly and cornered. But I don't think the solution is to keep her guarded, I think the solution is to watch her a little quicker, but also let her help you as part of the squad, which is what
Yeah,
they do
well, I
in
think
Decommissioned, and look how well that works in Decommissioned.
yeah, well, I think part of her development, which in these episodes it happens very fast, is her, you know, taking lessons from the batch, learning lessons, and being able to handle herself more, um, in a world that isn't, you know, her being like a super sheltered kind of just lab subject in Camino. Um, and so I think that's kind of the point of a lot of these episodes is how she learns to be a part of the crew, and Hunter learns how to give her what she needs and
Yeah,
how to take care of her. And we see that where he lets her run off, kind of like in the previous episode, and then we see I can't remember if it's in this, I can't remember if it's in Rampage or if it's in I think it's in Decommissioned, but um maybe it is in here, but we see that little scene of them, they're walking, and we see Hunter going with Omega, going through that list of things
oh yeah,
that he tells her to do, that kind of, they're both learning lessons. um they're both learning
absolutely.
lessons.
He's teaching her a lot, but she is also teaching him a lot.
Yeah,
Which is a very,
because
very Star Wars thing.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get much more
Yeah,
found family. It's can't get much more
yeah,
Star Wars than that. But I think it's interesting how Hunter has to simultaneously learn to be less protective, and learn to let Omega, make the decision to, be part of the crew, and accept the responsibility that comes with that, even though she's very young, but also to be able to protect her and know what her limitations are. And we see some of the bumps in the road there, where when he kind of chews her out, um, on Saleucami for getting attacked by the beast when she had no clue what's out there. No
yeah,
clue.
absolutely. It's a really cool pendulum swing. I think they do to give these both these episodes credit. They're a bit too lax, unknowingly in Cornered, and then they're way too harsh in Rampage, and the only reason that it goes well for them is they have to swing the pendulum a little bit in the other direction. But in Decommissioned, very much the conflict is not ever about them and Omega. We'll get to it, of course, but Omega does exactly what she needs to do. In that episode, and she gets a nice little moment of character development there, um, as well. Uh, I love, but I gotta say, we gotta talk about that Zygerrian energy bow that Omega picks up and she has for the rest of the season,
Oh
because
yeah,
it's
it
it's
becomes like her signature.
it becomes her signature weapon, and I think it's a really interesting. I think of it as a symbol of the expanding world around her. She just picked up this thing. She picked up um a like she picked up a weapon from a society known for enslavement, when she just realized that morning that enslavement existed, that slavery existed. Like that is the clearest symbol that I can see, which is that which is she is picking up the weight of not just the bow, but also everything that's happening in the galaxy around her that she didn't know about while she was sequestered on Camino.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a really cool symbol.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing. I'm very impressed with how you picked that out. That just did not occur to me, but that was, man, that's spot on. Is speaking of slavery, um, I mean, Echo, obviously, he has a very passionate response, when they're gearing up. He talks about, stopping slavery. I mean, what do you think about the clones, and specifically Echo as a reg, what do you think about their relationship to slavery? Because it's really interesting. We can talk about slaves of the Republic, that episode, obviously going back to Zygerria, but then um just the condition of the clones, specifically Echo, knowing the history and what he's been through in in the Clone Wars. What do you think about all that?
Well, first of all, I would like to mention to you, and you probably already know this, but Echo wasn't in Slaves of the Republic.
Oh, I know, but I mean, if we're talking
Yeah.
about that was just kind of like
Yeah. No, I know, I know.
it's funny that
it's
there's an episode already
yeah,
called that when it is on Zygerria,
yeah,
Zygerians. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not saying you didn't know that. I'm saying like it took me a second to process that,
Oh, okay.
and
No, yeah. No.
because he's presumed dead on Lolasaya, which happens before that.
Yeah.
But no, I think this episode, and I'll talk about this with Decommissioned as well, in a different sense, serves as a really interesting coda to the Zygerria arc in Star Wars: The Clone Wars,
Mm,
where it touches on a few of those same themes about, because there is this vicious brutality of the Zygerrian slavers. There's this, we talk about. I remember when we were recording this episode for the Clone Wars, we were talking about that psychological breakdown of getting people to view themselves like it's not just enough for them to view people as property and not human beings. They have to get the people to view themselves as property, which is the most
yeah.
psychologically degrading shit ever, and they succeed. They do very well at it. There's that whole monologue that I think that Queen Sintel does in that third episode about how one of the slave masters is trying to break Obi-Wan, and it very
Yeah.
nearly works. And I think of that like, it's that wanting to help but being oppressed
Yeah.
so much that you feel like you can't. And by the way, we obviously, I couldn't reference this at the time because it hadn't come out yet. But I thought of Slaves of the Republic in the first episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because
Yeah.
there's a scene, because that scene with the meat, the scene with the at the meat place where they're slicing up the big fish or whatever it is. Um,
Yeah.
like I think of Obi-Wan, there's that one worker who doesn't receive a fair
Yeah.
share of it, and Obi-Wan steps in and they were like, "Are you gonna say something?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm not going to."
Yeah.
That is
Well,
the Obi-Wan from Slaves of the Republic. That is the deflated,
yeah. I
go
mean,
off on too big a tangent.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's apt that you bring up. I think it's apt that you bring up Obi-Wan because, I mean, even going back to some of the novelizations in Legends and that portrayal and interpretation of what happens, what he goes through after Order 66. I think Obi-Wan's life is just all about what do you do when you want so badly to get up and take a stand, but life just kicks you in the ribs over and over and over again. Um, so yeah, it's a great example. Um, I think as far as your idea of the breaking and that idea goes of the spirit and the self perception, I think you're spot on to bring that up. But at the same time, I would also mention that the Bad Batch, I think, is the culmination of, we might even say, the unbreaking, if that makes sense, of the clones kind of as a collective. We start the Clone Wars with you know in the Malevolence arc, we're just clones, sir, we're meant to be expendable. And then this is the first time that we really see the clones, or some of the we see clones, um aside from Cut, of course, that we see clones really truly free. like truly not property of the Republic,
Yeah,
but
and
truly free. And I think that self their kind of self-image and their conception of like who they are and who they can be in the world hasn't really caught up to that yet. And I think is kind of that's what can be causing some of their their problems, and they're towing the line with going down the mercenary pathway of just accepting what's put in front of them without worrying about the consequences.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot there, and I think that. Sorry, kind of blanked for a second.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think there's a lot there, and I think that yeah. Do you have anything else to say about Rampage, or should we go to Decommissioned?
I think I have some more. I mean, we've kind of covered everything. Yeah, the Rancor. I think this episode is amazing for Omega. I think, you know, one of her greatest strength, her defining trait almost in this story is that she sees things so differently than any other clone and really anyone else in the show. In this episode, like she figures out somehow intuition. We don't know, but she figures out that it's Sid. She has the idea to release the baby Rancor. Um, and I think that for the show, that kind of defines her struggles and her process and her progress through the show, because she sees the world, the galaxy so differently. Like all the Bad Batch, they're jaded. They're constantly on the lookout for danger. They're a little bit cynical. They've been beaten down by this war, but Omega is super optimistic, and she sees friendship and connections and the potential um
Yeah,
of the world. And I just think it's interesting how that can be her greatest strength, but also her greatest downfall, because that's what gets her kind of that's what gets her almost kidnapped by Fennec Shand. At the same time, that's what helps her save her friends time and time again.
absolutely. Yeah, she is such an interesting character because she is that beacon of light in such a dark time.
Yeah,
Um,
like yeah, yeah,
should we go on to Decommissioned?
yeah. I mean, what did you think about this episode overall in comparison to the previous one, Cornered? Because I
I
know you weren't a
think
fan
this
of that one.
episode is cornered plus. I do. I think this
So you like it
episode
more?
is. Yeah. Oh, I like it quite a bit more. Again, I
Okay,
think I
okay.
think the two cornered and Rampage are not two of my favorites, but Rampage I think is a lot better for me. I think the action scenes are interesting. I think the world building is more interesting. I think the the there's some more thematic concepts in there. There's some more developmental concepts in there. Again, I think both of them pale in comparison to Decommissioned, which I like a lot, a lot, a lot.
Really?
We'll talk about. Yeah, I freaking love Decommissioned. Such a fantastic episode. One of probably the most underrated episodes of Star Wars animated television, probably ever. People do not give that episode the credit it deserves, and but we'll get to that when we get to that. But no, Rampage is quite a solid one. Uh, what about you?
I liked it. I think I think it was about on par for me with Cornet. I think to me it kind of it had tinges, it had shades of the problem that sometimes faced the Mandalorian, um of kind of just that mission of the week feel, where it's like, oh, the heroes need something, they find somebody who has it, oh, but in return they need a favor, they gotta go, and then off you go on whatever the shenanigans maybe. But I still a good episode. Omega. Omega is really compelling in this. The emotional and personal um kind of quandaries that the rest of the Bad Batch face. Yeah, it's just another the action. It's an action-packed adventure episode. It's another great it's another great episode for what it sets out to do. I think that some of these intermediate episodes, to me, they kind of feel like they lack enough stakes. Um, so I guess I would kind of concur with what you said earlier a little bit. I think in this episode, it doesn't really become a problem for this episode. But even though I think some of these episodes, even though there's a whole heck of a lot going on, it kind of just at least for me, it kind of just washed over me. Like I was never really, like it never got to that point like it did with when Hunter's chip go or when Wrecker's chip goes off, where I'm like, oh my God, like there's not really any sense of the potential for real consequences.
Yeah, I understand that, and again, that's a part of episodic storytelling. That sometimes you don't feel like there's stakes, and I get that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I exactly agree with that, um, but no, I understand that definitely.
I mean,
Uh,
I think that's not all bad. I think some of the best Star Wars out there is some of the really deeply episodic storytelling. And I think part of what makes those shows great is the writers and the creators trying to figure out how to still make it compelling within those constraints, you know. Sometimes by placing a constraint on artwork, you find another dimension to it. So I'm not trying to like bash on it for being what it is, because I think that's just part of what it is. But that being said, it does drag a little bit at times, I think.
no, I understand that. Um, I no this episode I think is a very solid good episode. That's what I think about it. It's
Yeah.
solidly good.
All these
Um,
episodes are really solid. I will say I think they just feel so mature and polished, I would say,
yeah,
for these like kind of intermediate episodes, especially in a first season. Like rewatching these, I'm
absolutely.
kind of like, dang, I really didn't appreciate these quite enough the first time around.
I felt that with all three of these episodes in a different way, but I feel like the one I felt it most with was Decommissioned, which I already loved, but
Mm.
like, fuck, it's a good episode. I think we should get onto it now. In Decommissioned, the Bad Batch are tasked by Sid to go retrieve a head of a tactical droid from a droid decommissioning factory on the planet of Corellia. While they are there, they bump into none other than Trace and Rafa Martez, who are trying to get that tactical droid head. It's a huge battle to get it out of there. They're battling these police droids. Wrecker takes a really bad fall and starts muttering this good soldiers follow orders. They're like, you know what that's about? I have no idea what that's about.
Oh, it just means that he's so dedicated to his team, man.
Yeah,
You know,
dedicated to the
it's
team. That
it's
makes a lot of
so
sense. Yeah,
he's saying good soldiers follow orders because he's so dedicated to being part of the Bad Batch that he
yeah,
would
no,
never turn on them.
he'd
Like
never
he would
turn on
never
them.
hurt them. He would
He'd
never
never
try to
hurt him.
hurt them.
Like
He would
like
never go after Omega. He would never go after
God,
Echo.
could you imagine what would happen if he went after Omega?
Imagine if that's ridiculous. They wouldn't
That
do
would be
that.
like the most
They wouldn't go
horrifying
there.
sequence in the Bad Batch if that happened. That would be anyway.
I
Beyond
can't keep
that,
a straight face making this a joke. I'm sorry,
uh,
it's too much fun.
it's too much fun. It
It's
is
too much
too
fun.
much freaking fun. But they're pinned down into a tight corner, and then they use the tactical droid head, indeed, to activate some of the decommissioned battle droids in the facility to fight for them against the police droids. After that, they part ways. The Bad Batch on the Havoc Marauder and the Martez sisters on the Silver Angel, their ship from their arc in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Tech gives them a code cylinder with the data copied from the tactical droid that got destroyed in their escape. They go back to Sid empty-handed, but Trace and Rafa are working to make a difference of some kind in the galaxy, fight back against the Empire. um, and they talk to their contact of sorts at the end of the episode, who about these this group of rogue clones running around the galaxy, um, and that's decommissioned. Um, yeah,
Where do you want to start with this one? Since this is the episode that you enjoyed the most, I figure you should have the floor to take this how you want.
yeah. First of all, I want to say that Corellia is fantastic to see. Again, between this and Braca next episode, we're getting two planets from like the Empire era stories before they appear in those stories.
Yeah,
Braca
it's pretty
before
great.
Fallen Order, and this before and Corellia before Solo. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to see the different sides of those. Because like Han could be on Corellia right now, probably not, but he could be. Um, Cal is definitely on Braca somewhere in those episodes. We just don't see him. Um,
That to me is pretty.
but
That's potential right there.
yeah, that's mind blowing stuff right there. And yeah, but mostly I just want to say this. God, I love the Martez sisters. I really do. I love them so much. They're fantastic characters. Elizabeth Rodriguez and Bridget Cully getting to come back and play Trace and Rafa again. Yes,
Yeah.
love that. Love that for them. This episode arc acts as I said that Rampage acts as a coda for the Slaves of the Republic arc. I think even better, this acts as a coda for the Martez sisters arc in the Clone Wars. Because a lot of the stuff that they tell the Bad Batch sounds like the stuff Ahsoka told them. And I love that so much because, especially when it's Rafa telling them, because remember, Rafa's always the one. She's like, "Oh, I'm looking out for number one. We can't
Yeah.
trust anybody else, so we trust each other." But Ahsoka really gets through to both of them. I mean, Trace more easily, but again, when Rafa says it, it means that she is internalized what Ahsoka's told her, and what she's advised her, and how she helped her out. And we think, and again, we know what happens in the rest of the season, that that the the person who they're contacting at the end of the episode is Rex. So
Yeah.
they have learned that lesson from their arc, and they're actively working now. They're not just good people who are going astray. No, they're good people who are actually trying to make a difference in the galaxy.
Yeah, I think there's a terrific. I think you're absolutely right. I think the parallel between, um, yeah, the bad. I think that there's a terrific kind of parallel between the Bad Batch and their journey, and then kind of what happened with the Martez sisters. I think specifically with Rafa, um, more than yeah, specifically with Rafa. I think of kind of figuring out that we don't always have to look out for number one. We can take care of our own and also do some good. um I also want to add, I agree, I love seeing Corellia here. I think Corellia's always been one of my favorite planets. I think it's such a storied and interesting planet, especially in the old expanded universe, and I was really excited to see it again. I think they could have brought out a little bit of a wider scope, maybe done more, because we see it in Solo. It's super rundown after the Imperial takeover. It's just totally this kind of industrial jungle. So it'd been nice to see it, because it's kind of alluded to see some of the side of that isn't just full industrial wasteland. What does it look like maybe before the Empire nationalizes everything, or in a part of the planet that isn't like that? From a world building geek out perspective, I would love that. One last thing. I may not love the Martez sisters as much as you do, but like, damn, they really kind of got like, the characters really kind of got screwed over by getting introduced when they did. Because I just think the 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 Martez sisters arc in season 7, it is simply it is simply just a respectable arc, and I think there's really no kind of explanation. Obviously, everyone has tastes. You like what you like, you dislike what you dislike. There's no explanation for the level. Well, actually, there is an explanation. That's just fans being racist and sexist and horrible. But
Yeah, I was
for
gonna
the
say.
level of hate that the Martez sisters have gotten, and for the level of hate that those episodes have gotten, like I still think if those episodes had been placed like if it wasn't for season 7 of the Clone Wars, people had such high expectations. I've kind of said this before. They had a certain kind of episode in mind. They had a certain kind of arc in mind. Um, and the Martez sisters definitely wasn't that. It slowed down. It took a look at Ahsoka, introduced new characters, which was an interesting choice for kind of this highly anticipated conclusion to such a beloved story. Um, I really think that a lot of people, I think, just didn't know how to manage or how to parse out the feeling of their expectations having not been met. And so their conclusion was just, oh, these episodes suck, even though I would stake money on half the people who vehemently hate these episodes just being neutral on them had they appeared in an earlier season.
Yeah, I will say, in my notes I was talking about how much I love the Martez sisters, and I also just ended that like particular part of my notes with also fuck them dude bros. Um,
Yeah.
no, no, I'm gonna say like I'd say around a good 5 to 10% of why I love the Martez sisters so much is despite the dude bros. Most of it isn't, but there is a bit of that. There is a degree of that. But just really they're fantastic characters, and I think the interplay between them and the Bad Batch this episode is really interesting. I also love because they were the first two arcs of the Clone Wars season 7, but like they had nothing to do with each other, but now they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
It's
It's
the
a
Bad
great
Batch and
connection.
the Martez sisters in the same episode, and I think it's fantastic to see. I think it's one of those examples of using those familiar characters to your advantage. And yeah, I quite really love how the Martez sisters are integrated into this episode. And let's see. I also love. Can we talk about Wrecker?
We can talk about Wrecker. We have to.
Good soldiers. Follow orders. This is our building up of that Order 66 inhibitor chip thing in there. I also love this is one of my other favorite things about this episode is that juxtaposition of the juxtaposition of Wrecker's good soldiers follow order moment and the battle droid line orders are orders.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where we talked about this at length on this show, but the clones with the inhibitor chips become the very droids they're fighting,
Yeah.
and there is
And I
no
think,
clearer parallel between that.
yeah. And the clones were designed, you know, by the Kaminoans to be more like droids than any of the clones would want to be, or as any of us would want them to be. And I think some of the hyper individualization that we see, I mean, by the end of the Clone Wars for the clones, I think the Kaminoans consider that a bug more than a feature. Um, yeah, I love how you see the droids turn back on and just instantly would like obviously they're being programmed. Instantly they start shooting at each other. Um, but to see the clones then, how it kind of pans out to them, you're like, oh gosh, like this is closer than we realize.
Yeah,
It's really interesting.
I also really like this too. This is a parallel I just thought of which is that we spend a lot of time at the places where the Republic is going to die. Um,
Mm,
in this
yeah,
in this season, whether that's Camino, whether that's Braca, all those places. We also
yeah.
spend a lot of time at places where the Separatists are going to die. The droid decommissioning facility, the former Separatist capital on Raxus Secundus in Common Ground, which we'll get to in a few weeks. Um, and again, it's all about that. I gotta say, it sounded hokey the first time Ezra said this in the Rebels episode, The Last Battle, but I really do love this. The idea that the Empire won the Clone War.
Yeah.
Like the Republic was meant to fail in the Clone War, and so was the Separatists. So were the Separatists. They were both meant to fail.
Yeah. Still, so it's still kind of, yeah, it's great. I think the way they just keep kind of showing us, hey, this era is ending. Look at all these symbols that you know and love. Look at them falling by the wayside. So
Absolutely.
sad. All those B1s and B2s. Hashtag save the B1s. Just
Hashtag save the
terrible.
B1s.
Just
Orders are
terrible.
orders.
Battle Droid Society.
Yeah. Battle Droid
Imagine
Society, baby.
imagine what could have happened if more B1s survived. If we
I,
have
I,
what if we have
I'm
1,000, what if we have 1 billion droids just like Roger? That
just
would
like
be
just like B one
that
two
would be
six
a
eight
sweet sight.
from Rebels. Yes, that's what I'm talking
Freemaker
about.
Adventures,
No, I know.
right?
Roger from
Rebel. Yeah. No,
Roger
you're right.
from
You're right.
Freemaker and all that kind of stuff. But B1268 is the one, is the guy who my favorite, who in the last battle, who greets the stormtroopers and then literally gets crushed under the leg of that AT-AT.
Now that is just
That is
that is
symbolism
just
right there.
that is just disrespectful.
That
What a
is
way to go. You come out of the giant stamp on Geonosis.
it's
You
not
get
Geonosis.
stamped.
It was what was it? It was Agamar.
No, I mean they're on Agamar, but I mean
Yeah.
imagining that this droid, imagining if they came from the original Geonosian droid foundry in Attack of the Clones, we see Anakin, Padme, Obi-Wan desperately trying to avoid the giant metal stamps.
Oh, I see.
That's what I'm
That's
saying.
funny.
You're made in
That's
a
tragic.
stamp.
Yeah.
You get stamped out. It's a cold universe. It's a
Yeah,
cold galaxy.
absolutely. It's a cold galaxy. Um, and I'll just end with this. When Rafa says, and I know I mentioned this a little bit before, but when Rafa says to Hunter, "In the end, we all choose sides," that is Ahsoka right there. I'm not saying that Trace and Rafa don't have them in that, but like that is Ahsoka's teachings to them on how to make a difference from that arc. And
Yeah.
it's so nice to see that passed down from the Jedi in their better hours to Ahsoka, to Trace and Rafa, and now to the Bad Batch.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the cores of Star Wars, is the individual choice, the choice of the individual to step up and
Absolutely.
make a difference. You see it in every single Star Wars story. And you can try and pull a Jyn Erso and be like, oh, I don't have the luxury of political opinions. But if you sit back and make no choice, that is a choice in and
Absolutely.
of itself. And it's usually the wrong one. That is what I will say. It is usually the wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. You got anything else for this episode?
Anything else for this episode? No, I thought it was another great episode. Definitely a bit more to unpack. I really like the exchange between the Martez sisters and the Bad Batch. They're really surprised, that the Batch would just go and get the droid for an unknown buyer without asking questions.
Yeah,
And Hunter is right when he says, oh, things are simpler when you're just a soldier. But now they're in a place where they really need to question their actions to make sure that they stay on the right path. Now that they're really, at this point, really in the kind of mercenary survival situation.
absolutely. And I think they're beginning to question that. I think this is the beginning of them saying, "Uh-oh, what do we? What are we doing here, and why are we doing it?"
Yeah, like this is kind of, I think when we see that the Ahsoka's message that was imparted to Trace and Rafa, and then Trace and Rafa are passing that along to the Bad Batch, and we see that start to take hold after this episode.
Yeah,
Because this is kind of the
100%.
furthest, if I remember, I haven't seen the rest of the episodes, some of the episodes recently. This is kind of the furthest they go towards that super kind of morally gray, um not really trying to serve any kind of greater purpose.
Yeah, I would say this is the furthest they go. Like the furthest they go with morally gray, like working for Sid and stuff like that. Yeah, I would say that. I mean, they do a favor in Infested, that one episode before the like at the very end of the season, and I guess you could construe that as that. But it they I think the events of the next 3 episodes, which we'll get to next episode, really change them and make them realize that if they're not doing good, then they're part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, not too much more to say, but overall, I really enjoyed these 3 episodes. Great world building, great details, good execution all around, and they really, they did a lot to kind of unpack and move forward the questions for the Bad Batch about their survival, about their purpose, and about their relationship to Omega. So
And I
I was I was really pleasantly surprised by these episodes. I definitely enjoyed them more than I did the first pass around.
and I enjoyed Decommissioned. No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. I think that Cornered is okay. I think that Rampage is good, and I think that Decommissioned is one of the most underrated episodes of Star Wars animated television. And I think that all 3 of them work great to build the world around us. Again, as you said, like we knew about Pantorans, we never visited their world before. We knew about Ord Mantell, we've never visited the world before. We never got to see Corellia this early on. We got that great world building. We got some great character development. I wish there was a bit more meat on the bones of the first 2 specifically, but that's fine. We got some great stuff coming up. Speaking of that, next week we are going to be, I think we officially announced this, but in case we haven't, we're going to be talking with Keith and Kerwin Yard from Father Son Galaxy. We've actually already recorded that episode. It was a blast. We're so excited to post that. We had a great time with those guys. And we will link their stuff down in the description as well as our stuff. Speaking of our stuff, thanks for watching this episode of In a Galaxy. You can follow us on Twitter at In a Galaxy Pod, Instagram at Star Wars In a Galaxy. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcast. We will be there. If we're not, email us swinagalaxy@gmail.com. You can also email us with your hot takes, opinions, questions, all that kind of stuff. And also follow follow my personal account on Twitter at OGFan327. That's also on TikTok as well. Also you can follow our spin-off show at In a Galaxy Trivia Epic Confrontations, which is going to return in November. Buck O'Brien versus Jerry Cable. We're currently in the final stages of planning that match, and we're very excited about it. And I think until then, may the Force be with you.
Always.